Hello and welcome to Moth News Live. It is Friday, it's 3 o'clock, and I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's hot. So hot that I had to shave my hair. I went to the doctor and said, Doctor, it's too hot. And he recommended shaving my head. He didn't do it. No, it was my son that shaved my head. So that's he seemed to get a lot of enjoyment out of that. There you go. And then I shaved most of my beard off. So there you go. I'm just saying that because there is a clip in here where I did an interview with a lady and my hair is completely different and I've got a beard and, it's just continuity, the basics. And I've gotten it wrong. My continuity skills have been, you know, lacking today and I'd like to apologize. But apart from that, everything's brilliant. Now, when I say brilliant, I mean terrible because, Ireland is in a state of, chaos, constant chaos, and it's all terrible apart from the sun shining. And I've been watching the World Cup, the Club World Cup, and I watched an American team beat a European team for the first time in a competition, and it was quite good. Messi, of course, is on that team, as is Suarez. So you're kind of going, oh, that's where all those brilliant players went. And yeah, they beat Porto from Portugal. Quite a good team, quite a formidable outfit, usually in these competitions, and they beat them 2-1. I'm sure Porto were more surprised than anybody, but it was great to see Messi scoring an absolute screamer of a free kick. So, look, it's not all doom and gloom, but let's just get into the doom and gloom after that. We will be getting into a story. I interviewed Anne this morning, Anne Kennedy. Anne Kennedy is an artist. She's a writer, published writer, and she's an activist. And she actually spends a lot of her time helping other people who are living with disabilities, older people. And she's not a young, whippersnapper herself. She's 72, but she, tries to devote some of her time to helping others. But she's been absolutely failed by the HSE. This is just another one of these stories where the HSE, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily mind if the HSE were neglectful of people and just like ignoring them. But when the HSE are getting involved in people's lives, supposedly with care in mind to help them, and actually making things worse, I mean, that's a serious problem. You know, whatever about not doing anything, but then getting involved in someone's life and adding trauma onto what is already a very traumatic, experience of a life. And I do believe, like here on Moth News, we're very much about fairness and equality, and that everybody, no matter what creed, color, ability, should have the same potential to enjoy their lives. It doesn't matter whether you have legs that work or legs that don't work, whether your brain works a little bit differently to somebody else. You should have the same quality of life. You should have the potential to have the same quality of life. You should have the potential to get on a train. You should have the potential to own your own house. You should have the potential to have a bath or a shower. All these things should be open to you. There's no reason why we can't afford all of these things to everybody in the country, to say, look, if you want, you can have what this person up here has, what this person with money has. You don't have the same amount of money as that person up there. I'm not saying that we want to give everybody like a swimming pool and a built-in sauna, they're, maybe if they needed a sauna and that would help them, with their health, but that everybody has the potential to have the basics, the basic human rights, so that they can enjoy their lives. But when the HSE, who are in charge of caring for the people of this country, not only are neglectful, but when they get involved in people's lives, they make them worse. That's definitely not, that's not good. The word care is to, I always think you put your arm around somebody and say, what do you need and what can we give you? Not what do you need and we're going to give you this, even though you don't need it, but it's kind of like what you need. And here's a wheelchair that doesn't quite work, but we're going to give you that anyway. Just like, if you don't have that wheelchair, we're giving you no wheelchair. And now you're being difficult. Now you're like, now you're on the waiting list. Now we're taking you off the waiting list. And now we're just ignoring you. And actually, we've made your life worse because we've given you a wheelchair. It doesn't work. And we've destroyed your house because we've tried to make adjustments to it to make your life better, and we messed up and we fucked up basically, and now your house is unlivable. This kind of stuff happens, and Anne is one of those people who's experienced this, and it's just absolutely devastating to hear story after story after story of the people in charge of care in Ireland absolutely making a hames of things and ruining. I mean, making a hames of things sounds like I'm making a joke, but literally ruining lives. So we will we have a clip of Anne I interviewed earlier, and you can watch all of that interview on our YouTube. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. So also I had a conversation with, here's more of it now. Here is more of it. I had a conversation with our friend Caoimhe. Caoimhe Haughy is a solicitor, and she works with a lot of these people who have had interactions and difficult experiences with care facilities in Ireland, care homes, the HSE, etc. And there's something that might make you smirk, but it's a condition known as undescended testicles. And if you're a man, you might have heard of it. If you're, when you're young, you might have had an issue with it. There's there's a massive scandal about to hit Ireland, and it's already started. Is that there's a lot, and I'm talking hundreds of young men who weren't treated on time because of waiting lists, because of, it seems, because of consultants not dealing with these things, who are now getting into their teens and beyond, getting to the point where they might want to have children, and finding out that this wasn't dealt with, and now they can't have children. And can you imagine the trauma? So here again, we have the HSE causing trauma to people's lives because of this very, very basic, should be done as a matter of fact when before you get to the age of 12 months, make sure the testicles have descended into the sack. And if they haven't, you do the thing. But hundreds of men in Ireland, young boys, this was missed. And this is just another, on top of the hip dysplasia, on top of the care home thing, now we've got men who are facing into life finding out that they're not going to be able to have children. And if they do want to have children, they're going to have to spend probably about $5,000 a pop trying to have a child through other means, and it's not cheap. And will the HSE pony up for that? You can chase them for it, I'd imagine, because they won't admit to having done anything wrong. So let's just first of all, then we will talk to Al at half past. He'll be in around 3:30, maybe 20 to, look, this is Irish news. We don't work on time. It's whenever we see Al, we'll talk to him, because we need to talk to him about the funding that has gone to startups in Ireland. We have a new story of this Irish startup, a brilliant startup. It's like online security, email stuff. I don't really understand it, but it's AI, it's tech, and they got some funding from Ireland. We see the same players, getting involved. 1.55 million off the top of my head was the funding they got initially. Seemed to have been doing quite well. Suddenly in the last year, then there was big losses in the company, and then they were sold to an American company. And this has been, put out in the news as, oh, it's great news. Irish startup sold to American company and they've taken on the tech, blah, blah, blah. It's the same old story. But the question is, so, okay, so Enterprise Ireland are the people who pony up the funding, as well as some other, so that's taxpayers' money. So if it's been sold onto an American company, do we get that money back? It's very untransparent. It's as clear as mud, basically. So we're going to talk to Al about that as well. Let's go back to Anne and let's have a little listen to her story. As I said, you can watch the full interview on our YouTube channel. It's MOTH_news on YouTube. This is Anne talking about. We were actually talking about somebody who came around to our house to insist that she had a bath, and as part of that conversation, this care worker, OT, they're occupational therapists, so they're supposed to come into your life and say, well, you need this, you need this, you need this, and we'll give you a grant for that, whatever. And she was telling me in this conversation, the person was standing in her bathroom saying, yes, and we'll have grey tiles here on the floor. And the person, Anne, who owns the house, was going, why are you deciding the colour of the tiles? And the woman said to her, well, it'll hide the dirt better. And Anne said, well, sorry, either it will be cleaned or that's my dirt. So why? She was like, the things this person was getting involved in, instead of actually like making her life. Anyway, we were talking about that, and then it just led into this, and you can play the clip there. So when they did interfere, so they're either washing their hands of you, but then when they were interfering, they were ruining what you did have and not being helpful in any way. Like, I mean, almost like
They made it so miserable for me.
yeah, yeah,
I lost interest in
yeah.
even trying down
Mm,
here. I couldn't even get the space to absorb my environment, the people or communities I could get involved with, or what I could do. I then wanted out from get go. I
of course.
wanted to get away.
Mm,
I couldn't cope. Everywhere I looked, there was hostility. I was really, really traumatized. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with severe post traumatic stress disorder. And it was named at the HSE involvement caused it.
of
And
course.
they said that I did testing and it showed by a neuropsychologist that I had a quality of life in the bottom 20% of the population. I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm worn out. Last week, I was taken to hospital. I'm 72. Taken to hospital by ambulance with a blockage. I've got Crohn's disease. I've got a lot of, I mean, I have a lot of medical problems. Uh, I was sicking up and I sicked up all over my clothes. So they put me in a hospital gown, split down the back. And then at 1:30 in the morning said, you can go.
What had they done? How had you been treated for them to go? Well, you're well now. You can go.
I wasn't well. I contacted the Crohn's unit after I got home, but I left I left. I was in a hospital gown, split down the back with a dressing gown thrown over. I was in my slippers and it was pouring rain and it was 1:30. They told me I could go to where where people were waiting on chairs and I could pick a phone number off the wall for a taxi. And I'm 72 with a neuromuscular disease, chronic illness, and I was being booted out at 1:30. Fergus Finley, when I told him, he said, that's abuse. But what do you do? I was thinking, so I got a
And
taxi.
that was last week.
Huh? Yeah. So then I, I got the taxi, the man, and he said, will you sit in the front or the back? And I said, Jesus, rape victim in the dark, and well, he was very nice. He was
Well,
naive,
but
nothing wrong with him. But
yes,
I mean, you just don't do it. I mean, I was
but
really
you were,
sick.
but also your experience would make you feel fearful of people,
Yes,
and also you're
I'm
a
not
woman of a
well
certain
enough.
age. You're in a hospital gown. It's 1:30 in the morning. You get into a car with a strange man. It's not to do with the taxi driver. It's to do with the HSE just letting a woman who's 72 years of age out into the night, barely
Yes.
dressed, and expecting her. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting,
It
despicable,
is.
shocking, and it is absolutely abuse. Fergus Finlay is right. It is
It is.
abuse.
I mean, I felt I'm so weary. I couldn't say a word. I mean, he left me at the house, my twin's house, and the dog started barking. It was 2 o'clock by the came in. I couldn't even see the key, the box for the key, and it had only been put up. It was lucky I didn't have Alzheimer's because I remember the code for the first time, and um, it's like and then I get in and I have to set up my sleep apnea machine, and I was legless, and Margaret, my twin, doesn't walk, so all she could say is, "Who's that? What's happening area?" And you get in, and I just said, "This is the pits," and you lie there, and then you wake in the morning and you're grim, and you try to get through that day, and then you ring the unit, and they said, "Well, if you're not feeling well, you go back into ED." I mean, honestly, and then the next week I was brought back in again, ED. I had very, very high blood pressure. And I went in, I was crying, and the blood pressure had gone down, and they were terribly kind. They put me in the back of the waiting area in a transfer chair. And I can't sit in chairs anymore. I mean, I'm propped up with pillows now all over me. And I had to wait in a chair.
So that's Anne's story. Now, let me just say to you, Anne is not Anne is not a problem person. Like Anne, you you have to watch the full interview. And as I said, it's on our YouTube channel. If you saw, so okay, Anne is profoundly deaf and can barely see, right? You wouldn't have known that from the clip. This this wasn't noticed by her doctors or GPs when she was young. Okay, she ended up in London, having struggled to get through the schooling system. She was late diagnosed autistic as well. She is so full of determination, and she has this massive can-do spirit. She ended up studying art in a college in London. Just the determination and the sheer will and the talent as well. She ended up working on a movie called Watership Down. You might have heard of it. She was one of the artists that drew the rabbits. Okay, that's where she ended up through her own sheer will. But as a person, I mean, it was only when she got to London that she went to see a doctor, and they said, "You just serious? How did you get? Like, how did you get here? You've got serious problems with your hearing, you've got serious problems with your eyesight, and you're probably autistic." She didn't know any of that, so that none of that was diagnosed in Ireland. You know, up until a certain age, she was just like, she just had to be determined because she was seen as a difficult child. You know, she wanted to do things her own way, and this is still how we kind of view children in Ireland. I did read an article of a young man who's trained to be a doctor who left school and didn't do the leaving cert, you know, the end of school final exam, um, because he was autistic and he couldn't stay in that environment. And they were like, well, there's no other way of doing it. You've got to get the leaving cert. You can't go to university without it. So he left school and thought, well, that's it. But he now has ended up finding a path, and he's going to train to be a doctor. He's in the middle of training to be a doctor. So we're still doing this to people. Anyway, back to Anne. She ended up working on Watership Down, and it was in London where she found out she had these problems. And then she comes back to Ireland years later. And every time she asks for help to do something, because she wants to live her life. She wants to be outside. She wants to have a wheelchair where she can get around. She wants to be able to help others. She has a determination. She also has something that she has a lot that she can contribute to society. And we are heaping trauma upon trauma to the point that she said there she had PTSD. Now PTSD is what happens to people who go to war, soldiers. You know, from being bombed, from seeing people dying, from killing people. That's where PTSD first came about, and we learned of it. She has PTSD from dealing with the people, the care system in Ireland, from the HSE. We'll rename them the PTSD, because this is what they're doing. And it's absolutely, as an Irish person, I'm absolutely mortified. She has no quality of life. How can a 72-year-old woman be released from hospital wearing a hospital gown with no back on it and told, here's your bag, order a taxi yourself to get home at 1:30 a.m. in the rain? And then she rang the next day to say, I'm still not feeling well. And said, well, if you're not feeling well, get yourself back into that same place that she was thrown out of at 1:30 a.m. Why would she go back there? How is that the advice? But this is Ireland at the moment. Anyway, on to lighter news. Not onto lighter news. We also this week spoke to Caoimhe, some people pronounce it Caoimhe Haughy, and we were exploring this new scandal. Probably the biggest scandal that's going to hit Ireland, and has started already. The biggest scandal Ireland has ever seen. Undescended testicles, as I said earlier, when a male child is born, they'll check for the testicles. Have they descended into the scrotum? And if they haven't, they'll go, okay, well, let's check again before they get to a year old, and make sure they have. And if they haven't, we need to do something about that. Well, hundreds of young boys in Ireland, this was missed through waiting lists, or just like people just not getting their shit together. And now they're getting to a certain age where they're finding out they can't have children, and all of the stuff that comes with that. So there's more trauma being meted out by our care system in Ireland. So let's have a little, we'll watch a bit of this. This is Caoimhe Haughy, the solicitor who deals with a lot of these families and will be dealing with all of these cases. This is another scandal that hit the HSE and the children's hospital institution in Ireland specifically. Possibly, as Caoimhe said, possibly the biggest health scandal to hit Ireland. And we've had some humdingers down through the years. Have a look at this.
I felt a chill going down my spine, Keith, to be honest with you, because as it happens, I'm doing a case in the office. Now, it's nothing to do with this latest scandal, but it's for a young man who, at birth, what we say in the case is that the pediatric assessment when he was born failed to detect the fact that his testes had not descended appropriately. I'm sorry now if I'm using language that is sensitive and fairly stark, but had not descended into the scrotum, into the sac, shall we say. And so this went on, and it was only when he reached male adulthood, and he was with his lovely wife, and they were, starting a family and going through all of that. And issues arose, and then checks were being done, fertility testing, etc., etc. And then, out of the blue, bang, he discovered that he was infertile because this condition had remained undiagnosed for all these years. And one of the consequences, which we know about, which is alluded to in the various subsequent media reporting, I should say that it seems that this report, it seems to be in the hands of many media outlets and seems to be completely in the public domain, but yet our Minister for Health and our government are still refusing to publish it. This is causing huge anger and a lot of upset amongst patient advocates, particularly the Scoliosis Advocacy Network, the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Network. But back to this case. So essentially, if this is not treated, firstly, if it's not diagnosed, which happened in this very tragic case, but most importantly, if it's not treated within a certain time window, which is 9 to 12 months, the possibility is, or the likelihood is, that the damage will be done. There is no treatment then. And what it will lead to is infertility in the male, in the boy, and the consequences of that, obviously, for his future. But not only that, there's a risk of cancer. Then there's the necessity of hormone treatment. There's the psychological damage. There's denial, many constitutional rights, for example, the right to bodily autonomy, the right to bodily integrity, the right to have a family. I mean, this is, in my view, to answer your question, a scandal of massive proportions in terms of the damage done. To think that as a child, all of these things, all of these rights that one grows up and expects to have, automatically fundamental rights, just taken away from you because you've been left on a waiting list and not treated in a timely fashion. It's head exploding for me. And for the first time, this is a health scandal that is purely and only affecting our male population. We've had so many scandals, the Hep C, cervical check, mother and baby homes, essentially affecting women and children. But this is the first time that this is a health scandal affecting the male population. And I don't think that has ever happened in Ireland. And it'll be very interesting, in my respectful opinion, to see what the attitude will be to this. I mean, as we know, in cervical check, there were very strange, odd attitudes in the early days, uncovered by Dr. Gabriel Scally.
Sorry, to take my headphones off there. Carry on.
Dave, you remember Dr. Gabriel Scally who did the cervical check scoping inquiries, and he came out very strong in the very early days and described a culture of misogyny and paternalism in the healthcare system. And I always remember one quote that he stated, that a lady he had interviewed had reported that a doctor she met when she was, getting her diagnosis, well, nuns don't get cervical cancer. I mean, I don't have to tell you or your audience the prejudice behind that. So here we are now with a healthcare scandal affecting our male population. So I'd be very interested to see what the patriarchs out there have to say in relation to this, and particularly what apparently is coming out of this report from CHI. I mean, I've seen language that the use of the word abhorrent, toxic, bullying, people afraid to speak up, a defamation case apparently with 2 consultants at war at each other. And all of this has resulted in apparently a general surgery, oncology general surgery service within CHI at odds with a urology service within CHI, and mismanagement of lists. Apparently now as well, we're finding out mismanagement of funds from the National Treatment Purchase Fund. So patients, boys, baby boys have suffered, and the life-altering consequences of what they have suffered is, as I said, it's mind-blowing.
I mean, as you're talking there, it seems to be becoming more and more apparent that a lot of the issues that we're seeing with scandals, talk about the hip operations, talk about, anything to do with the HSE or to do with the CHI or any of these, a lot of these government departments, institutions, whatever you want to call them, are caused by, in this case, like you're looking at misuse of funds, but a lot of the times, like interdepartmental politics. Like I don't want to speak out of turn, but I can remember having a conversation with somebody who was involved with a government department, and they were talking about their HR section, and that person who headed up that HR section actually said the phrase, my first concern and my priority always is for my staff. And I just felt like that, to me, having heard that so many years ago, and then seems to be the culture of looking after your patch, of fiefdoms, of people trying to get somewhere, people, I mean, with men, a bit of dick waving, power play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That seems to be a much bigger issue and much more important and much more prominent and much more important to the people involved in these places like the CHI and the HSE than the actual care of the patients. The patients are coming last every time. This is a huge, huge problem. And you're talking about egos over healthcare. You're talking about money, finance, people lining their pockets, people wanting more, greed over healthcare. And now, as you're saying, we have another massive scandal where I've interviewed men who have gotten to an age in their life where they want to have children, they can't. I know the psychological damage. Yet again, we're talking about mental health, mental health care, mental health being affected adversely by the people who are supposed to be supplying the care to the country. It absolutely boggles the mind.
No, 100%. And I think what you've said there is kind of struck me in that in the last couple of years, there's a common theme that has emerged from the various scandals affecting CHI. First we heard about the surgical springs, and then obviously the hip dysplasia. There is another issue that apparently has arisen with gastro buttons. It's been lightly reported, I think, in the media, not something I'm terribly familiar with. But now we have this in relation to the failure to treat the condition of undescended testes. And I think what has emerged from the reporting that we've all seen, Keith, is that at the back of this, there is this ego of consultants and, as you say, fiefdoms and minding my patch and making
looking
sure
after my own and
yes, my own. And
more concerned with who's getting what job and who's moving where, and these kind of issues seem to be much bigger in their worlds than the care of the patients, which is the job. And it just seems like I can't not see it. Like it just seems, the more I see it, the more it proves itself. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing which I think is really important for your listeners to note is that, well, two things. Firstly, apparently this issue with regard to the undescended test days was first was highlighted back in 2008, and apparently there was another report called the Dixon report. I'm not even familiar with it, to be honest with you. I'm still doing my own research into this, but concerns were raised at that stage because there was a question over children being transferred from Crumlin to Temple Street and then not having the appropriate follow-up surgical service in the transfer. So they kind of got lost in the system. And I think this is why we have this Crumlin Orphans terrible title. But in addition, apparently our maternity hospitals, 5 years before this whole issue came to light, this report we're talking about, I think it was eventually completed in 2021. So what are we talking about? Maybe around that time, 2016, 2017, 2018. That the maternity hospitals, because obviously children are born in maternity hospitals. When you're born, a pediatric consultant or doctor or registrar, their job is to come in, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and in the case of a little boy child, obviously that they have their genitalia, everything is intact. So they expressed concerns about referring children on, or boy children on, and they were not being treated in a timely fashion. They weren't getting the intervention. So the maternity hospitals were raising this 5 years before this report was ultimately completed. So, what is going on in our healthcare? I mean, why is it always elderly people, women, and children? Why? Why? Is it because they are the vulnerable ones?
They're easy to. I don't know. It seems to be it seems to be a historical thing with Ireland that we just can't shake, is this treatment of women and children and the elderly. And it's always been this, and it's never, this is who we are. This is how we treat children. This is how But I'd be reluctant to paint consultants and doctors and the healthcare system with the same brush. But
exactly. I want to say that because look, there are so many good people out there, and I'm very privileged to say I have friends in the medical profession who I utterly respect and who I completely regard in, very fondly, etc. But there are the rogues. I'm sorry, and it's been proven. Or not proven, but it's emerged from the surgical spring scandal, the hip dysplasia, and now this. There are rogue surgeons out there who are getting away with this arrogance, this, misogynistic. I'm not saying that out of turn, but this, it's my way or no way.
It's the old, and obviously not so old, but it's the old patriarchy, and I'm a doctor. And we used to see it with our own GPs, or, the standing in the community. You're talking about the local priest, the local doctor, the power they wielded, and this idea. And as a country, we almost give that to them. Do you know what I mean? They're the untouchables. It's time we looked at that.
They shouldn't be, because, apart from the harming of patients, and children patients, but they're also doing terrible damage to those young doctors, trainees coming up through the system. This report is littered. Apparently there was 49 people interviewed, and the majority of them all talked about this abhorrent, this was the word used, toxic, bullying, can't speak up, humiliated, demeaned, spoken down to, as a result of which apparently numerous clinical nurse managers left. The mental health issues have arisen with the trainee doctors. They work hard enough, 80 hours a week, and having to deal with this. The destruction of the system, all at the hands of one or two or three or four rogues. The management. Where is the management? And
they don't. We've talked about this before. They don't have the teeth. They don't have. There's nothing they can do. They're untouchable. You have these ego-driven demigods strolling around hospitals, being absolutely, just at the basics, just being rude, difficult to work with, and arrogant, and like we look at our nurses again, and we're going, the nurses are getting this in the neck again, and then we have to look at all of the problems in healthcare in Ireland. Like,
but it's
are they all these being caused by the few?
Well, yes, and I think it's like in any organization, you have the boss or the CEO or whatever you want to call it, and you lead from the top, okay? And like people should be able to come to the boss or the CEO and say, look, there's a problem here, and it should be dealt with, not swept under the carpet because the boss is afraid to speak to his number one managing director or whatever it is. I mean, I'm using very kind of basic examples.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the money that has gone in to setting up CHI, which first came into existence in 2019, prior to that, Crumlin and, Children's Hospitals, Crumlin, Temple Street, there's an element of Tala, we're under the HSE. Now, I've talked about, I think I've mentioned this before, Kappa, where a lot of the hip dysplasia surgeries were done, is not part of CHI. It's a separate hospital. But yeah, so CHI, a lot of money was put into establishing CHI. And this was obviously in anticipation of the new Children's Hospital. It was felt it was appropriate to kind of take the management division, the management and care of children out of the hands of the HSE and have a kind of separate sister HSE organisation to manage the provision of healthcare across Ireland for children. So we had a CEO, and I'm going to name her, Eilish Hardiman. Okay, she was in charge from the beginning, Keith. Where is she now? She oversaw and was there when all of these scandals were erupting, were under her watch, brought to her attention. And where is she now? Sidelined, thanks to Stephen Donnelly, former Minister for Health, into a nice new job where she doesn't apparently now have to answer any questions for her oversight and her management of CHI for these crucial years when she knew what was going on. And she seems to have done nothing about it, including taking to task these these consultants and or doctors who seem to be running what you've described as a fiefdom.
I mean that whole thing that you can, and this is very Irish, that you can do a job for a few years, you can make an absolute hames of it, you can affect lives, you can affect people as well. You can have the adverse effect. You're brought in to head up a system of hospitals. Ultimately, it's all about care for the people of Ireland. This is our money. It's the taxpayers' money that's funding this. The doctors are supposed to come out and use this money to care for the people. That's the agreement. That's the contract. That's the social contract. So to be in that position, to have been so terrible at your job that you're affecting lives, and to then I feel like this is very Irish. Just move to a different job and refuse, or not even refuse, but like not even, by law almost, you're the legal expert, by law almost not have to answer any of the questions. Like I'm just going to run away from this now, and I'm going to just leave this burning dumpster pile, this fire that will never go out, behind me. And just so then nobody is answerable. And to me, when you've got a situation, I mean, you'll have come across companies who, if you try and bring an action against them, and then suddenly, well, we're not actually the company, that's the company over there, and the money goes through there, but like that, he's actually this, and actually that and there's some PO box in Belgium or Brussels or something, and you can't find out who is responsible. It's really difficult to take people to task. That when you think about companies who do that, you think, oh my God, that's so corrupt. That's a terrible. That should be illegal, whatever. When it's your government, when your own government are doing that thing where they move people, where the 3Ds that you've spoken about a lot, and we in Ireland, I know it's a term, but this term whistleblowers, which I don't really like, because I'm like, it's almost like a bad thing that like, oh, the whistleblowers, and the Irish public are a bit like, bloody whistleblowers. The media have managed to create this impression of a whistleblower, fueled by lies being told, by places they've worked with. This idea was, these are just people who are who work in a place and are going, this is broken, this is bad, and they're almost, the whistleblowers should be the heroes, and they're on the edges of our society. Do you know what I mean?
No, they are.
This is all bad.
It is, and I kind of think you wouldn't have this in the private sector. Well, maybe. Well,
you'd be fired if you did a bad job, first of all.
Yeah, and it's like if you look at the whistleblowers, and thank God for them.
Yes.
And I know a few of them.
I only hate the term whistleblowers because it's become a kind of a bad thing almost. Like, these are great people.
Yes.
We should be encouraging these people.
Exactly. And so it seems, Keith, from what I know, is that the majority of the whistleblowers are coming from state, semi-state, and predominantly HSE. So that's all public. So what does that tell you about the way, let's just stick with HSE and the CHI. What does that tell you about the way they're being run? That people feel so torn, their conscience is getting to them. They're going in and out to work every day. They're seeing these practices. They're seeing patients potentially being harmed. They're seeing their colleagues being bullied, nurses around the corner crying, somebody in a room having a panic attack or whatever it is. And they feel compelled to speak up and speak out. And it's endemic within the HSE and now clearly within CHI. So it's like it's rotten at the root.
Yeah.
But it's been going on for years, and nobody seems to want to take it to task. And this big word that I love using, accountability.
Transparency, accountability. Who's responsible for this? Who did this job? Let's, like, it's the thing of we go back to the civil service or the job for life, that you can't be fired. I worked in RTE, and I saw it there, where I was contractor, bogus, self-employed. But if you got to a certain place, you didn't have to really do a good job. You just had to stay to collect your brilliant pension.
Yeah.
That is as you mentioned, the private sector, you would get fired. I worked in radio in the private sector, and if you're not doing a good job, you'd be fired. I mean, I was fired because I was only on a bogus self-employed contract with RTE. I was fired.
Another major controversy in itself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at this, and it's every department. I would talk about the culture in RTE, and it's brought about by this. People clocking in, people on holidays for 6 months, people just asleep at the wheel, just no interest in the job. Like so if you look at RTE, and I always think about the content. So RTE are there to provide content, news, current affairs, comedy, whatever it is. Just like the HSE and the CHI, the content with RTE is the very last thing anybody thinks about, because there's a huge concern over the pensions. There's huge concern over position. There's huge concern over ranking. There's that fiefdom thing where it's like company politics. What actually is going out? I'd say half of them don't even know what's going out on the television. I'd say half of them don't even know what's going out on the radio. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same thing here with the HSE, the CHI. The last thing, the most important thing, the reason they're there is the care of people. Yeah. Especially women and children in this case, because men seem to do okay. Although, maybe that's unfair. But the care of the people of Ireland seems to be the very last concern of the people involved in running these places.
I think you're right. It's like they've lost sight, of why they're there. Yeah. I mean, my mom used to talk about if you wanted to be a nurse or a doctor, that was called a vocation. Keith. You never hear that word now anymore. You know, vocation kind of conjures up dedication, care, conscience, conscientiousness, you know, all those kind of very important words if you're working in the care industry. But that seems to be gone. But, you know, I blame management here. I blame the system. You know,
Because at this stage we've got young doctors and nurses,
yeah,
and you know everybody that works in you know, to keep the hospital going and is at the coalface, is meeting the patients every day. They're in survival mode.
yeah,
These are all trauma. You're talking about traumatized people.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, you know, we've built, well, we haven't finished it yet, the most expensive hospital in the world. And, you know, please God, it'll be opened in the next 12 months or whenever it is, if that
I won't be holding my breath though.
Down the road. But what really concerns me, in light of what's gone on with CHI over the last number of years, is how do they expect to bring all the disciplines, the consultants, the surgeons, the nurses, the physios, the healthcare workers, you know, how do they expect to bring them under one roof and expect them to bed in and settle down and go, oh, that's great, we're all now working together, we've all got to share theatre space, we've all got to, you know,
have an understanding of each other's difficulties and processes, and try and fit into that and work with each other. And
but like all we're hearing lately is toxic, and you know, a culture of bullying and you know, I can't even think of the words.
Well, people working in very difficult circumstances, nurses. I mean, you could, you know, I mean, you see, then the knock-on effect then is like our nurses and our guards and people like that aren't earning enough to buy a house because of the housing crisis. And we're talking about a traumatized country. We're talking about people surviving on their wits. We're talking about people whose mental health is at its lowest because, and it's not because there was times in Ireland when we didn't have enough. There was times in Ireland when we didn't have money.
Yeah.
It's the difficulty now is we seem to have money.
Yeah.
But we still can't do anything.
But it's been Keith,
we're slaves to the job. We're slaves to the mortgage. We don't have time for our children. We're at our wits' end in work. We're talking about, you know, traumatized and, you know, people in survival mode in hospitals and Gardaí. Like, this is the state of this country. This is when people feel like there's something feels off at Ireland at the moment. There's something wrong with the energy. You're looking at marches, people pointing the finger at immigrate. This has been created by the way the country's been run.
Yeah, no, to me, it's all about big business, big tech, big pharma. You know, it's the top of the triangle. It's not, you know, whatever about the middle, but it's certainly not on the lower, the foundation, you know, level of the triangle.
Yeah. Get the basics right.
Which is what supports an economy,
yeah.
which is what supports social cohesion, which is what supports communities.
Yeah.
It's the base, you know, as you say, the Gardaí, the nurses, the teachers, all of those who are providing an invaluable service to keep our society, our communities going.
Yeah.
And they're just being left to struggle, cost of living, you know, non-access to healthcare, or timely healthcare, you know, sitting in A&E departments for hours on end, you know.
Everything is a struggle. Everything is a struggle. And then we'll get back to the specifics of the conversation, but then when we've spoken about the care homes in Ireland, when you've had you know, you've had a bad experience with a care home where something has happened, you know, we had all those people who died that probably shouldn't have died during COVID just because they were old. We say, well, look at, you know, which to me seems like a dreadful, that's a stain on our copybook as a country. But it's when you try and, even in England, they're doing, in the UK, they're doing this better. When you go and try and get answers and some information and make a complaint, then on top of the trauma you've already experienced, the government will will give you some more trauma by pushing you away, calling you a witch, it's a witch hunt, whistleblower, all these things. And that is just, we're traumatizing our people in the first place, and then we're re-traumatizing.
Yeah, it's a demoralization and a dumbing down a lot of the time, that if you speak up, you'll be punished, you'll be alienated, or we'll do the David and Goliath on you, we'll rally the forces, we'll get out the big guns. So it just seems like a tsunami coming at you, like, how can I fight this? How can I keep going? I'll just give in, But I do feel, Keith, that there's a lot of moms and dads out there right now, the surgical spring scandal, the hip dysplasia, and now this. And I feel a very strong sense of anger. And we've had enough. They've had enough, Keith, moms and dads.
I think so, and I think that we talked about before. If the HSE or if they're trying to, and the government trying to say, well, that's an isolated case, that's an isolated case. When you put all these things together, everybody everybody's been affected by the mismanagement of our care system in Ireland. Everybody, and it's almost like there's a shame. People don't like to speak out. You don't like to put your head above the parapet. You see how whistleblowers are treated. You see how, if a nurse speaks out, people are. But I think there might be a moment here where everybody goes, hang on a second. This is all of. So this is you, my neighbor. We're all struggling here, and there's a tipping point on the way. I think you're right. How many people do you think are affected by this this particular scandal? Have you any idea or?
From what I can tell from what I know of the report, I think up to 200 charts of patients were looked at. Now, what's come out of that, I don't know, but the period, I believe, was like a snapshot between December 2020 and March 2021, which is only 3 months. And I think up to 200 charts were sort of picked, if you like. And then the children, obviously, the boy children, what happened to them thereafter was assessed. For example, how long did it take them to get off the waiting list, to get in to see a consultant or not? And I think what has come out of this report, which we've already addressed, and this goes into the issue with the National Treatment Purchase Fund, that many children were still on a waiting list after a certain period of time, which this report has concluded was not acceptable and was likely to lead to harm to the patient.
And I suppose we're in this period where the government will try to not talk about it and not discuss it and deny it for a little while until they have to, and then 10 years down the line they come out and make a public apology. Just make the apology now. Talk to people. Be transparent. Stop doing if you do the same thing over and over again, it's like you've lost your mind. The country has lost its mind. We need to change how we do things, how we treat people, and it will pay dividends. Forget about money. Forget about the celebrity companies and the glamour. Just look after the people, and it will pay dividends. I know you have to go, so
No.
I appreciate your time, but just there's an Oireachtas committee meeting. Is that today or tomorrow?
So I think HICWA is in today, and I think CHI is in on Thursday. And I think I've seen somewhere that the list of personnel for Thursday is very interesting. It's the clinical director of Temple Street, also the current CEO, Lucy Nugent, and surprise, the former CEO, Miss Eilish Hardiman. So I think everybody should be tuning in on Thursday to see what happens, what questions are posed, and what topics, because there's a lot to discuss. But just to maybe finish on this point, I've mentioned the Scoliosis Advocacy Network Group and the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Advocacy Group and the 4 girls. They're just fantastic. And they're clearly very close to all of this because, as I mentioned earlier, spina bifida children are part of this report. And apparently what has come out now is that this report has concluded open disclosure was not carried out as there is no, this is what it says, no significant scientific evidence that delaying treatment will equate to patient harm in this patient cohort. When asked if this comment also includes children described in the unpublished report as orphans, the Crumlin orphans, among children in the waiting list clinics, a spokesperson said, the highlighted line includes all relevant patient cohorts. So what is CHI saying, Keith? Which is it? You know, this is more of it from CHI, this confusion, obfuscation, you know, trying to twist the narrative. Publish the goddamn report. Contact the families who are implicated in this report. Bring them in. Do proper open disclosure meetings. It's in the Patient Safety Act of 2023. Why this ducking and diving and parsing of information? It's only going to make moms and dads more angry, more determined, and the government would want to really pay attention here because angry moms and dads are not what we need to be dealing with. They've enough to be getting on with the cost of living crisis, struggling with everything they're going through, you know, other issues with the economy. But the health of their child, I think that is a tipping point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you wouldn't want to be calling for people to down tools for a couple of weeks.
No.
But you know what I mean? It's the, once again, we're putting egos. Yeah, God forbid if mums and dads just down tools, stop going to work for a few weeks until all of this is sorted, you know? Because if the people in charge of our government departments aren't willing to do the proper job, I wonder if a general public strike where everybody just down tools for a couple of weeks would have an effect on. I think it seems like that's the only way to get these people to wake up at this point, because once you get to a situation, and if people down tools, like the French would do this kind of thing quite often, and then you're hitting the pockets of industry in Ireland, and people are board members are missing their dividends, then they will take notice. Thanks to Caoimhe Haughy for that. Now, very finally, before we wrap up, I don't even know if I have time for this, but this is a topic that we have spoken about and you should be aware of because it affects all of us, taxpayers. You probably haven't heard of it, probably don't know much about it, but it is the role of Irish government-backed investments in startups. So this week, there was a company called Mesh, which is a Dublin-based cybersecurity company. Mesh had raised 1.55 million in seed funding. So with a lot of that money would have come from Enterprise Ireland. Other money would have come from a company called Elkstone. So they would have raised some of the money. Enterprise Ireland would have ponied up a good bit of the money. And then Mesh, just last week, it was just announced that Mesh had been sold to an American company. Now we are trying to find out. So none of the information about that transaction has been made public. So Enterprise Ireland have taxpayers' money to give to help startups. Brilliant. And then Elkstone get involved and they raise some seed capital. Now, Elkstone are a company, they get paid for their services, okay, which is fine. They also get a percentage. Apparently, it would seem. They haven't got back to me yet, so I don't know. But I got it from what I can see. They then get a percentage if the company sold on. But even though we have invested, our taxpayers' money has been invested in this company, and then there's a transaction takes place where it's sold to an American company, and we're not privy to that information. To me, there's something off. Do you know what I mean? So we have reached out. Personally, I emailed Enterprise Ireland and Mesh for some information, and neither of them have responded to me yet. I will chase them up again, so I'll bring you news on that next week. It's interesting that they haven't responded to me, because this news that Mesh had been sold to an American company, we're going, oh, look at this Irish startup, Enterprise Ireland, Elkstone, blah, 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 great. Now they've been sold to an American company, woo! But none of the information of the transaction is made available to anybody, and you have to get a freedom of information. You have to pay for it to get the information to find out, it seems. So I like, they're saying this is great news, and they're putting out a press release going, here, look at this. This is fantastic for, for startups in Ireland. But then when you email them about this great news, and go, oh, could you tell me the detail? Can I have somebody on MOTH to interview them about the details? How much was invested from taxpayers' money? How much did Elkstone raise? And then how much was it sold for? And do the taxpayers then get some of that money back? How does that work? I mean, I don't know these things. But when you email about this great news and this is wonderful, and then they don't get back to you, you're only emailing them based on this press release they sent out about this great news, and then they just stonewall you. Interesting. So anyway, that's something to keep an eye on. We have emailed both Elkstone Mesh and Enterprise Ireland. We've heard nothing back. As soon as I do, I will let you know. If they don't reply to my next email, I will have to go on and spend some money and get a freedom of information to find out the information of the transaction, of this brilliant transaction that took place. That's great for Ireland, that they don't want to tell me about. Interesting. Anyway, that's it. That's all the doom and gloom I have time for today. But remember, it's not all doom and gloom. It's mostly doom and gloom. But just try and get on with your life. And my advice to you would find a nice patch of land somewhere, find a container, build your house in that, and grow your own vegetables and have a goat, and all will be well. We're just going to have to go off grid. If everybody goes off grid, what can they do? Come on, lads, let's go. I'm going to the beach. I'm down in tools for the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of your day. As I said, you can watch that interview, any of the interviews we played today, on our YouTube channel. It's at MOTH News, MOTH_news. Follow us on X at MOTH News, Instagram at MOTH_news. And yeah, that's it. That's all the bits I have to do. And I just want to say shout out to the lads here at Brown Bear Studios, doing a great job. I hope they get to go out and go to the beach now. They're looking a bit pasty. There's so much sunshine out there, and they're still looking pasty. They must be working their fingers to the bone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck.